Oumuamua, why you think it might be of artificial intelligence, and if there is any evidence that supports the idea of this not being a typical asteroid or comet.
The question is, who produced Oumuamua? I realized that there is a completely new way for us to discover evidence for other civilizations, which is very similar to archaeology. Elon Musk may not be the most accomplished space entrepreneur since the Big Bang.
How might future technologies like AI or quantum computers help us uncover these mysteries?
Our universe was made by scientists. It allows for scientists to appear in it that will create baby universes.
Does space-time actually exist according to you?
What happened before the Big Bang?
If alien civilizations do come and live with us, if somehow we merge, are humans in danger in any way?
We should be really careful in transmitting radio signals because there might be predators out there and they will come to haunt us.
Do you think the world is going to end at some point?
Definitely. There is no way out.
Thank you, Professor Avi Loeb, for being on the show today. You have been the mind behind some of the most exciting theories about extraterrestrial life and interstellar travel. Your work has pushed the boundaries of science by exploring signs of alien civilizations and so many other topics. It's truly an honor to have you here. Thank you.
Thank you for having me. I should say that the one reason I'm searching for a higher intelligence in interstellar space is I don't find it often here on Earth.
Exactly. That makes so much sense. I actually graduated in consciousness studies. That was my major, and that's where I really personally got interested in really exploring this whole aspect. I want to go just straight into it. Our audience is really keen on knowing the story of Oumuamua and why you think it might be of artificial intelligence, and if there is any evidence that supports the idea of this not being a typical asteroid or comet.
Yeah, so Oumuamua basically changed my track of research. Before that, I worked for several decades on the first stars and galaxies in the universe. That was a subject that not many people were interested in. And it's sort of the scientific version of the story of Genesis. I was among the people who designed the Webb telescope when it was called the Next Generation Space Telescope. I was on the scientific advisory committee for that design, and back in 1995. And I wrote 2 textbooks on the first stars and galaxies. Now it's one of the major frontiers that the Webb telescope is pioneering. It found galaxies when the universe was just a few 100 million years old. And another subject I worked on was black holes, and I was the founding director of the Black Hole Initiative at Harvard that brings together astronomers, physicists, mathematicians, and philosophers. I was also chair of the astronomy department at Harvard, but for 9 years. But in 2017, October 19th, 2017, there was a very unusual discovery reported from the Pan-STARRS telescope, a survey telescope of the sky that was looking around at near-Earth objects because they pose a risk to our existence. We know that dinosaurs were killed 66 million years ago by an object the size of Manhattan Island, 10 kilometers or so. And we think that we are smarter than dinosaurs were, the non-avian dinosaurs. So we can forecast in advance when such an object will collide with Earth, and we want to prevent that. And so there was this plan that started in 2005 because the US Congress tasked NASA to find most of those near-Earth objects that could pose a risk to us. And so Pan-STARRS was developed to look for near-Earth objects. And there it was, a near-Earth object that they flagged just because it was near Earth. It was the size of a football field, about 100 meters based on the amount of sunlight reflected from it. But it was moving too fast to be bound by gravity to the sun. And that was the first object that was declared as coming from outside the solar system because the sun's gravity is not strong enough to bind it. And it looked really peculiar because the more data we collected on it, the more anomalous it looked. It was tumbling every 8 hours, and the amount of sunlight reflected changed by a factor of 10. So that meant it has a very extreme shape. When you see the most of the area, you get 10 times more light reflected than when it looks sort of sideways on the sky, projected on the sky. And the best fit to the variation of light was that of a pancake-shaped object, a flat object, disc-like. Moreover, it was pushed away from the sun by some mysterious force. And it was mysterious because there was no evidence for dust or gas that you see around comets. That the evaporation of those gives the comet a kick from the rocket effect, the same mechanism that pushes jet planes. But there was no evidence for dust. It was definitely not a comet of a type that we are familiar with. And nevertheless, there was this non-gravitational acceleration. And I suggested that it's just a reflection of sunlight that is pushing this object. And at the time, that sounded very reasonable to me because I was working on the possibility of propelling a small spacecraft with a very powerful laser. It's called a light sail, basically having a thin membrane that is being pushed by light. And so when I realized this object is being pushed by some mysterious force without any cometary tail, I said, well, maybe it's a very thin object, just like a light sail. And turns out that 3 years later, the same telescope in Hawaii found an object that is definitely pushed by sunlight. And then shortly afterwards, the astronomers realized, oh, that one is actually a rocket booster that was launched by NASA in 1966. So we know that it was technological. And I said, well, we know who produced the 2020 SO. This is the second object. The question is, who produced Oumuamua? And, just raising this question that it may have been technologically manufactured, at first, it didn't make too, it wasn't too problematic because, the reviewer, the referee of my paper accepted it for publication within 3 days. That's unheard of. It's really fast in the most prestigious journal that has the highest impact factor, the Astrophysical Journal Letters. But then as soon as the media and the public started paying attention, I started getting pushback and personal attacks. But I decided not to surrender because this is still a viable possibility. I should say that a week ago, I was informed that there is a whole class of space trash. These are called trash bag objects that are basically behaving just like empty trash bags that are being pushed by the wind down the street. And these are known to be pushed by radiation pressure from the sun, and they exhibit very unusual motions. And these are just pieces of satellites that were broken around the Earth. And so there is this entire population of empty trash bag objects that I was not aware of. And here comes Oumuamua and behaves like an empty trash bag. But I just suggested the possibility that it may be technological in origin, because there may be a lot of such fragments that came from megastructures that were constructed, let's say, by advanced civilizations. One example to think about is a Dyson sphere. That's a megastructure that was imagined by Freeman Dyson to capture as much energy as possible from a host star by surrounding it with a spherical collection of possibly light sails that are hovering above the star and collecting the energy. But stars evolve and they become much more bright towards the end of their life. And you can imagine such a megastructure breaking up as a result of radiation pressure, and all of these pieces will be carried into interstellar space and would appear as anomalous Oumuamua-like objects. So for me, the discovery of Oumuamua was really a milestone because it changed my perception. I realized that there is a completely new way for us to discover evidence for other civilizations, which is very similar to archaeology, finding relics left over. And those civilizations that produce these relics may not be around anymore. They may be dead, but we can still figure out that they existed.
That is incredible, and I can't believe you received, like you said, a lot of attack and personal attacks as well for this discovery. That shows that you've really just been an outcast by the scientific community throughout your career. That's wow. I
Well,
pers-
I should say that the only reason I can that I don't need to care about the pushback, that I can survive, I mean, is because I'm well established, and I'm very familiar with situations where, for example, we don't know what most of the matter in the universe is. 85% of it is called dark matter. And when I worked on this subject, it was very much encouraged to think about innovative ideas and non-conventional explanations for dark matter, because then the observers and the experimentalists, if you suggest something that looks interesting, they would search for it, and you were rewarded for actually proposing it. But for some reason, in this context, when I suggest a non-conventional explanation for Oumuamua, all the experts that used to work on asteroids or comets, they keep arguing that it's a rock of a type that we've never seen before. It's definitely a rock. And to me, it's a surprise because, for example, Elon Musk launched the Tesla Roadster car as a dummy payload on the Falcon Heavy launch of 2018. And it's now going in a elliptic orbit around the sun. And in fact, just in January 2025, at the beginning of January, an amateur astronomer reported about an object, an asteroid that comes close to Earth, and it was given a name, and then some people realized, actually, this one has orbital parameters just like the Tesla Roadster car. And so then, of course, they removed it from the asteroid list. But what I'm saying is, Elon Musk may not be the most accomplished space entrepreneur since the Big Bang, 13.8 billion years. So imagine a lot of space trash, Tesla Roadster type objects floating in space. And, of course, my colleagues would argue it's a rock of a type that we've never seen before. And I feel like the young kid in Hans Christian Andersen's tale that said, Oumuamua has no cometary tail, similar to the emperor has no clothes. And the adults in the room say, oh no, it has a tail, but you just can't see it. It's just like this folk story. Now, if you ask the experts on comets, they would say it's a comet, and it's a dark comet. That's the way they classify it now. It's a dark comet, meaning it's a comet with a cometary tail that cannot be seen, okay? And I say, okay, well, you may call an elephant a zebra without stripes. So you may say an elephant is an unstriped zebra, but that's not the right way to categorize it. You can't just say a dark comet because it's an oxymoron. A comet is identified by its cometary tail. You are telling me to believe that it's a comet even though the signature of a comet is not observed. Why should I do that? I mean, you would call the Tesla Roadster car of Elon Musk a dark comet, wouldn't you?
Wow, that is incredible. I have personally read a lot of the essays that you've published. They're all amazing. There are a couple topics I wanted to discuss about. There was one essay you wrote about, I think you suggested that replicating the conditions that birthed the universe could bring us closer to quote unquote God's expertise. I want to know from you that how might future technologies like AI or quantum computers help us uncover these mysteries?
Well, that's an excellent question. So first, let me explain what I mean. When we see that the universe is expanding, and so if we reverse the history backwards in time, we would realize that there was a point in time when the density of matter and radiation was infinite because you compress everything. And that point in time is called the Big Bang. Now, Einstein's theory of gravity breaks down at that point in time because the curvature of space-time becomes very extreme, and we just don't have a theory that unifies gravity with quantum mechanics. So when you get to very high density of matter and radiation, you really need to include quantum mechanical effects. And Einstein's theory is divorced from quantum mechanics. Both of them were theories developed a century ago. Einstein's theory about a decade before quantum mechanics was fully discovered, and both of them operate in different regimes usually when we encounter them, but at the Big Bang they are both important, but we don't have a quantum gravity theory. However, if we had such a theory, we could have forecasted what happened before the Big Bang, because we can go through what now looks like a singularity, and actually it would not be a singularity when you have quantum gravity, and we could figure out what were the initial conditions that led to the Big Bang. And that is similar to having a recipe for a cake. So a recipe for a cake includes the ingredients, the way you should put them together, how much heat you should apply at each stage. And if you have a recipe for a cake, you can hope to become a chef. You can imagine that the only thing you're missing is an oven and the ingredients. And once you have the opportunity to mix them in the right way, then you would be able to bake a cake. And so a quantum gravity scientist could have the same, the same wish of, instead of making a cake, making a baby universe. If that quantum gravity scientist knows what the ingredients are, then that scientist knows how, in principle, you can arrange for those ingredients and a process that would give rise to a baby universe. Now, if you think about advertising the job of God, the job advertisement would, at the very least, say that anyone that wants to apply to the job of God should be able to create a universe. Because in all religions, God is responsible for everything we find.
Correct, yes.
So my point is that a quantum gravity scientist could apply for that job. Now, we don't have such scientists, but an alien civilization that had more than 100 years of science and technology, let's say they had thousands of years, millions of years, or even billions of years, they may have cracked the secret of quantum gravity, and they may have the recipe for creating a baby universe. From our perspective, they might resemble the notion of God because they can create everything in the universe. And if you think about it, maybe the universe was made by a scientist. Our universe was made by a scientist, and it allows for scientists to appear in it that will create baby universes. So it's just like, each generation of humans has babies that eventually mature, become adults, and have babies of their own, and it's sort of baby universes all the way. So that's a possibility, but we don't know. So if I had an opportunity to meet an alien scientist, the first question I would ask is, what happened before the Big Bang? And then if you ask me what is the impact of knowing that, it could unify science and religion, because many of the questions addressed by religion represent an entity that is superhuman, which I can imagine being an alien advanced civilization. That could be a good approximation to what we imagine as the ability of God.
Thank you for that explanation. And I also read one of your essays about some drone that was here in New. So I live in New Jersey for the last 25 years. I've been on this planet, but I was actually traveling the last couple months, and I don't know when this happened, but apparently there was some mystery drone in New Jersey. Can you talk a little bit about what that was and what you thought it was?
Yeah, so a lot of drones were reported, and they were some of them were big, the size of an SUV, and uh, people who live in New Jersey were very puzzled by that, and we didn't get much information from the US government. But most recently, President Trump announced that they looked into it, and at least all the information that they were able to retrieve is telling them that these were authorized by FAA and they were either government related or private citizens that were trying to fly drones. So the claim is there was nothing unusual. It was not an adversarial nation, according to the White House. I don't know if they know everything on this. The Galileo project that I'm leading aims to monitor the sky, following the reports from the Director of National Intelligence that there are anomalous objects. I don't care about any human-made objects. I'm primarily interested, even if there is 1 in a million of the things that we see in the sky. Obviously, it's a mixed bag. There could be drones, balloons, airplanes, satellites. Even if there is 1 in a million that came from outside of this Earth, I want to find it. And actually, the Galileo project has one observatory already operating at Harvard University, and we just published a paper on the commissioning data of 500,000 objects that we monitored in the first 5 months. And we hope to be able pretty soon to have the ability to infer the distance of objects in the sky just by using the method of triangulation, having multiple sensors looking at the same object from different directions, just like the 2 human eyes allow us to estimate, to gauge the distance of an object. And so that is one observatory, but I just received the funding for another one in Pennsylvania, another one in Nevada, and potentially also in Indiana. So hopefully by summer 2025, we'll have 3 operating observatories, and then another one within 2 years after that. And they will give us a few million objects in the sky every year within 2025, let's say. So if one object behaves in ways that have flight characteristics clearly beyond the performance of human-made technologies, that would be extremely exciting. And I always tell my team, we can write a paper dedicated to just this unusual object. If we don't find such an object, we will do statistics of those objects that we see that are birds, airplanes, and so forth. Now, with respect to New Jersey, we did try to look, but my impression was that these are human-made drones. Based on all the reports, they were flying like human-made drones. So I was not particularly excited about it.
But I'm really happy to know about the project that you're working on. I'm excited to know about further updates that we get on this. It sounds like an amazing project.
I should say just one more thing about the project. We have 2 other avenues that we are pursuing. One is to find more objects like Oumuamua. And this year, there will be a new observatory in Chile called the Rubin Observatory that will employ a camera of 3.2 gigapixels, 1,000 times more pixels than a cell phone camera. And it will monitor the southern sky every 4 days. And so we hope to find Oumuamua-like objects from the same family with this telescope every few months. And then we could potentially use the Webb telescope to study them. That's something we didn't have with Oumuamua because the Webb telescope was not launched yet. And the other path of investigation is related to objects that collide with Earth. These are called meteors, and they are cataloged by the US government. The US government operates a network of satellites that are looking for the heat emitted by ballistic missiles because they pose a national security threat. But every now and then, there is an object that comes from outer space that collides with Earth, and they can see the fireball as the object burns up as a result of its friction on air. And they catalog. NASA then gets the data because it doesn't represent anything to do with national security, so they release it to the scientific community in a catalog. And I asked my student to look back at that catalog, and we found an object that was interstellar, just like Oumuamua, that was moving actually faster than 95% of the stars outside the solar system. So it was really fast, and it maintained its integrity down to the lower atmosphere. So it was made of material that is very tough. And so we published it with the undergraduate student, Amir Siraj, that was his name, not far from your first name, Amir. And then I decided to lead an expedition to the Pacific Ocean, to the location of that fireball, that explosion. And we retrieved materials from the bottom of the ocean that is about 2 kilometers deep. And we analyzed 10% of those materials so far, and we found some fraction of the material, about a tenth of it, of these tiny fragments that we collected. They were less than a millimeter in size. About a tenth of them had a chemical composition different from the materials that made the solar system. And we are now hoping to go again to that site to collect bigger fragments that would be able to tell us much more about the original object. So this expedition that, it was filmed by Netflix. There would be a documentary released within a year about it. But it offers an opportunity to put our hands on material of objects that came from outside the solar system for a few $1 million in cost. Whereas if you wanted to do the same for an object like Oumuamua that is passing near Earth, it would cost billions of dollars to do the same, as with the asteroid Bennu that I mentioned before. So looking for interstellar meteors is one of the additional objectives of the Galileo project, and searching for artificial objects, that were unusual in terms of their speed, in terms of their material strength. Perhaps they were made by an advanced technological civilization.
Wow. You had an essay, Professor, that was titled something like, "What if aliens turned out to be non-vegetarian?" The reason I want to ask you about this is because I guess the question comes down to that: if alien civilizations do come and live with us, if somehow we merge, are humans in danger in any way, according to you?
Well, Stephen Hawking a decade ago argued that we should be really careful in transmitting radio signals because there might be predators out there and they will come to haunt us. The thing is, we don't know the consequence. We have been broadcasting since, for 100 years. And so these signals went out. We cannot stop them. They are propagating at the speed of light. And so far, they reached about 100 light years. And, there are, within 100 light years, there are probably of the order of tens of thousands of stars. We don't know if any of them has technological civilizations. So we might not hear back until these signals go another factor of 10 in distance, when there would be a good likelihood for an active technological civilization with radio receivers that could search for us. Eventually, the entire galaxy will be aware of us, but it will take a while. It will take tens of thousands of years, which by cosmological terms, it's really a short time. But for us, we still benefit from the fact that we are visible as a technological civilization only to our immediate vicinity. The signals of light did not make it still to very large distances. But I don't agree with Stephen Hawking. And he, by the way, he visited my home about 7 years ago. Sorry, it was actually 9 years ago. 9 years ago. And I don't agree with him because I think that we are not that significant. We tend to think that we deserve attention. And by the way, that's one reason that Enrico Fermi said, "Where is everybody?" And when a lonely person asks you this question, "Where is everybody?" you tell that lonely person, don't be presumptuous. You're not that attractive that everyone will come to sit next to you and you will see your partner immediately. You have to be proactive. You have to at least look through the windows of your home and see if there's anyone out there that you might like, or go out of your home and go to dating sites. Okay, that's what you say to. And Enrico Fermi didn't really use a telescope to search for aliens. He was just saying, "Where is everybody?" As if they were supposed to be in Los Alamos, where he was having lunch in the 1950s, which, it's a very short period of time relative to the billions of years that cosmic history is measured by. So that's very presumptuous. And, it may well be that there are lots of relics. I calculated based on the interstellar meteor that we know about, there should be of order 1 million objects from interstellar space right now, the size of a person, roughly, or a meter in size, within the orbit of the Earth around the Sun. 1 million of them. And one of them collides with Earth every decade, simply because it happens to cross the path of the Earth around the Sun. But most of them just pass in the darkness. We can't see them because they reflect very little sunlight. But if I had a few $1 billion, I would engage in a search, a dedicated search, and looking through the rocks, that there must be a lot of rocks, and checking if there is anything other than rocks, if there is any space trash from other civilizations. This is something we've never engaged in. There are only a few interstellar objects known so far. And I think we should definitely check our backyard for any packages that may have arrived from a neighbor.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for that input. I need to ask you this. Considering the vastness of the universe, do you believe that space-time itself might hold secrets that we've yet to comprehend, perhaps even related to interstellar travel? And does space-time actually exist according to you? I know Professor Donald Hoffman talks a lot about this. I would love to know your insights.
Yeah, definitely. I don't think that we are the pinnacle of creation. As much as this may sound like bad news, it's actually good news, because we can benefit from a higher level of intelligence. I mean, just think about it. We spend $2.4 trillion every year on military budgets, and they are dedicated to either killing other people or protecting us from other people killing us. And it's all related to political disputes and conflicts, mostly about territories or resources on this rock that we were born on. But there is so much real estate out there. We just need to look up rather than down on each other. And it's a lack of intelligence for us to be possessed, with all these conflicts on the resources we find on this rock that we were born on. It's such a tiny piece of the big picture. A sign of intelligence would be to explore other places, go beyond the solar system, not just to Mars, and send our ambassadors beyond the solar system, and think about very long term, not the next year or the next 4 years, the way that politicians think. Politicians are not necessarily the best role models. I think that our best role models are in interstellar space. There are other civilizations, and we should aspire to find them, because we can do better than we are doing right now. Now, related to what you asked before, we are developing artificial intelligence that could supersede the human brain within the coming decade. And in that case, we can take advantage of those systems that we develop. I think of them as our technological kids. And I have no problem with my daughters being smarter than I am. I see that. I'm very proud of that. So if we develop AI systems that are more capable cognitively than us, and are able to process a lot of data, much more than the human brain can, and they see patterns, and they understand things that we don't understand, perhaps they will alert us to things that we missed. And, as we discussed before, the majority of the scientific community refuses to discuss this subject seriously, meaning allocating billions of dollars to the research, making it part of the mainstream. And this approach, is really not very productive, because, we also don't know what the dark matter is. We are investing billions of dollars. We haven't found it. Maybe gravity is modified. Maybe there is no dark matter, but we are not bothered by that because that's the spirit of science. And on a question that is so important for the future of humanity, we should definitely spend a few $1 billion to figure out, whether there are other technological civilizations. We shouldn't jump into conclusions before collecting the evidence. That's the way science is done. We should be open-minded. And I think it's a missed opportunity so far. And that's why, despite the pushback, I feel very strongly about promoting this frontier. Now, if I were a young person, I wouldn't be able to get a job if I were to operate this way because, obviously there are all these echo chambers where people amplify the narrative that was developed for decades and just introduce nuances to what is already known. And, as boring as it sounds, that's the only way for people to not to take risks and promote their career, get honors and awards, and be recognized as experts. But it's not really the reason that we do science, and I see science as the privilege of maintaining our childhood curiosity. I haven't changed much since I was a small child because I was wondering about the world. I was really trying to figure out things, and I see the job of a scientist as being exactly the same. And you make mistakes when you explore because you don't know the answer in advance. But you're open-minded. You don't assume that something is an extraordinary claim and therefore we shouldn't invest any effort in trying to address it. So I tell my students, never pretend to be the adult in the room. Maintain your childhood curiosity. And the only reason I can deliver this message is because I have tenure at Harvard University. I served as chair of the astronomy department for 9 years. I know the way science is done from the inside out. And I'm a practicing scientist. So I'm not like those popularizers of science. If you look at some of them, people like Brian Cox or Neil deGrasse Tyson, they basically describe what other scientists are doing. Okay, it's sort of like commentators on a soccer match. They tell you how Cristiano Ronaldo is passing the ball and so forth, but they are not really on the field.
Right.
And I'm doing my, I'm in the trenches. I publish papers every month, a few of them, and so I'm doing it, from a perspective of a curious kid that wants to figure out the world without assumptions.
I definitely agree. First of all, I do think that yes, a higher budget needs to be allotted for these experiments and for this research. And it's so great to have someone like you with this expertise who's actually working on this cause. And like you said, from childhood, you've had this interest, which means you've always wanted to know about this. I truly feel that this is the biggest question in life to understand, why we're here, what is outside of here. Personally, I'm interested in that as well, which is why I decided to study about consciousness and, in my education. I want to know from you, Professor. I think there's been a surge in government interest in UAPs or unidentified aerial phenomena. So, do you think that NASA and other space agencies are being transparent enough with their findings, or not really?
Not really. There was a committee established at NASA because when the previous NASA administrator, Bill Nelson, was appointed, he said that he would like to figure out what these unidentified anomalous phenomena are, what these UAPs are, because he saw some data when he was in the Senate. And the following day, I contacted the person responsible for science under him, Thomas Zurbuchen, and he asked me to submit a white paper on this subject, and I told him I would like to study it scientifically. But then I never heard back, and they established a committee. And since I didn't hear back, a month later, I established the Galileo project that I'm leading on the search for unusual objects near Earth that may be extraterrestrial in origin. And they told me that the committee will now look into it and make recommendations. So altogether, it took them 2 years, and eventually the committee recommended that the scientific work should be done on this subject And I said, well, that's what the Galileo project is doing. So what did you actually manage to accomplish by having this committee? So again, people like to talk and establish committees, but what really needs to be done is the work. And that's what the Galileo project is doing. NASA, at the end, as a result of this committee, established a small office within NASA, which is basically delivering information that they get from their satellites, from all the data centers, delivers it to the Pentagon. That's my understanding. So they basically identified this as a subject of interest to the Defense Department, because some of these objects presumably are produced by other adversarial nations, and they want to know everything about them. But they haven't explored the scientific path of saying, suppose 1 in a million is not from China, Russia, North Korea, whatever. Shouldn't we find out? That's curiosity-driven research, that has nothing to do with national defense. And they haven't explored that path. So I was disappointed by that. I hope that, if there would be new revelations about any data that indicates something beyond humans, that it will open the door for more scientific inquiry. But in the meantime, the Galileo project is doing the initial research that we can afford given the small level of funding that we have.
That's incredible. I asked this question to the guest we had from the European Space Agency as well. I want to know from you that do you believe that the survival of humanity will depend on us becoming a multiplanetary species? And I guess a continuation of that is that do you think the world is going to end at some point?
Definitely, there is no way out from the evolution of the sun. The sun is a nuclear reactor that we happen to be at the right distance from. It's just like being next to a fireplace, that gives you enough warmth and you feel comfortable. But imagine the fireplace getting hotter and hotter, and eventually, in the case of the sun, it will boil off all the oceans on Earth within 1 billion years. At that point, the Earth will turn into a desert. And I find it hard to believe that humanity, would survive next to a star that gets more and more harmful. Eventually, the sun will expand when it becomes a red giant. That would take another 7 billion years from now, 7.6 to be accurate. And then it will engulf. It holds the potential to engulf the Earth. So the envelope of the sun will get so big that the Earth will be engulfed by it, so that the Earth would start spiraling into the core of the sun. And at that point, obviously, nobody can survive because the core would be very hot. So what is the long-term future of humanity? Well, if we will be intelligent enough to leave the planet before the conditions become very difficult, then we might survive over billions of years as a civilization. And you can imagine, right now, the most creative idea appears to be going to Mars. But I don't, that's the agenda advocated by Elon Musk and echoed by President Trump. But it's just another rock, okay, that happened to be at some distance from the sun and used to have liquid water on the surface, doesn't have an atmosphere. The temperature changes by hundreds of degrees between day and night. And there are very energetic particles, cosmic rays, that damage the human body. Over a period of a few years, the human body would be damaged beyond repair. So the only way to survive there would be to go underground, which would be ironic because humanity started in caves and we would have to end up in caves. If I had the opportunity to go into a cave on Mars, these are called lava tubes, I would search the walls of that cave for any prehistoric paintings, because there might have been someone over there. But at any event, it's just another rock. And why would we go to another rock? If we want to do that, it has actually a moon called Phobos, and I recommended going to that moon as a a loading dock, because it's easy to go in and out of Phobos, and then from there deliver the goods to Mars. But what I imagine in the longer term is having some space platform, and I call it Noah's spacecraft, in the spirit of Noah's Ark, the biblical story where Noah built an ark to save animals from the great flood. And you can imagine an analog saving life from a catastrophe on Earth by building a spacecraft, a space platform. So I can imagine something like that. There is a question of what replaces gravity, and one idea is rotation of the spacecraft would give us an effective gravity. You will have to maintain a habitat that allows people to live there. But, we moved from the jungles of Africa, we moved to cities.
Right.
That's a big leap, going from trees to high rises. And going from high rises to space sounds to me like less of a leap than going from a jungle to high rises.
And do you suspect, like, around what year? I know you were describing the whole scientific aspect of why the world would end if it has to. Do you know what year that would probably be, if any?
Oh no, so if the sun is the issue, then it will be billions of years, okay? 1 billion years for the oceans to evaporate, and after that, 7.6 billion years for the sun to engulf the earth and carry it to the center of this, the remnant. There will be a white dwarf there. But there are other catastrophes that are shorter term. And the one that I'm worried about the most is artificial intelligence, AI, because, we developed modern science and technology over the past century. Quantum mechanics was discovered just 100 years ago. That's it. So you may ask, okay, how much more do we have? How much more time do we have? If you were to choose a random day in your life, it will most likely not be the first day and not your last day. It will be somewhere in the middle. So if we say, oh, we are now in the middle of our lifespan as a technological civilization, we just have another century or two. And actually, technology is accelerating. AI is evolving exponentially on a few-year timescales. So I'm really worried that the technologies we develop, one way or another, will bring risks that we don't even appreciate because they are accelerating in ways that we have never witnessed before. The risks are unprecedented. We are getting better at dealing with people. There are less wars, less conflicts, because information is shared in a way that was not as transparent in the past. But there are other risks that come with that, and AI is one of them. And it's not clear to me how much longer we would survive. And one way to save us that I see is by realizing what saved aliens. If we realize another civilization managed to survive for a long time, produced a lot of self-replicating probes that we find, we would have a role model.
Wow. As we end this conversation, Professor, I would love to know your takeaway message for everyone listening, to be honest. You have so much expertise and knowledge. What is your takeaway message that really comes from your heart to the people?
Well, stay open-minded and young in the way that you approach life, and because it's all about learning. It's a learning experience. Being a scientist is learning about nature. There is an arbitrator. Science is better than politics because by getting data and evidence about nature, we can learn something that we didn't expect, something new, because it's independent of us. There is some physical reality out there that we can study. And we have some ideas about what it may bring, what kind of, how to think about it. But when we collect data and evidence, very often we learn something new. And therefore it's fun because you keep growing. And the only way to grow and to learn something new is if you don't assume that you already know everything. And, a lot of adults pretend to know much more than they actually know. That's what bothered me as a kid when I would sit in the dinner table, ask a difficult question, and the adults in the room would give me answers that didn't make sense. And the beauty of science is that you can stay a kid. And it's better than politics, because in politics, it's all about power, pretending. If you manage to convince a large crowd of something, you have political power. But it doesn't mean that this something is correct. That's why very often we fall into a pit. We believe something, and it turns out to be wrong, and then we suffer from that. So that's the way politics takes place. And people have different political views. So if you were to train AI on political questions, you would not get a single answer. You would get, at the very least, two answers, one from the left, one from the right. So you would not be able to represent reality in a unified way. There will always be at least two possible answers. And when you see newspapers, they subscribe either to one answer or the other in the way that they are leaning. And so that is the source of polarization in politics. But the beauty of science is that even if initially, because of ignorance, you have people with different opinions, different views, eventually, if you collect enough data, it becomes irrefutable. So if I find a gadget at the bottom of the Pacific Ocean that has buttons on it, the only question, and it looks like it was extraterrestrial in origin, nobody would be able to doubt that. And the only question that remains is, should I press a button?
Thank you so much, Professor Avi Loeb, for sharing this message. I applaud you for the courage you have to speak up about everything you found. It's very few who, have that expertise in their field and have the courage to stand out amongst the crowd. So thank you so much for doing that. I really encourage everyone watching to look out for your published work and your essays. I'm just addicted to them. I'm going through them one by one. So thank you so much for your time. It was an honor to host you here today.
Thanks for having me. It was a real pleasure, and stay young and open-minded.
Thank you.